Hello, everyone, and welcome to Matt and Evan in the Morning. I am your host, Evan Kamikow, and joining me today is the one, the only, the Maryland equipment manager, even though I don't even think he's an equipment manager, Matt Leviss, good home friend of mine. He's here to talk sports. We are Matt and Evan in the Morning. Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Gave me a great task to prepare for this, and how could I pass it up?
Here we go. So a little bit about this episode before we really dive into it. Today, we're going to be talking about our top 10 moments in sports history. This could be anything from political moments to physical plays that have gone on to anything about sports that have changed the way that society looks at them. I'm really excited for this. It's going to be a fun episode. We have our top 10 list. We're going to dive into it. We also have honorable mentions that I think I have like 10A, 10B, whatever. Matt, what about you? What are you feeling on this one?
My top 10 list is actually a top 11 list. I have a 10A and 10B. Picking 10 moments in sports was so hard. I will tell you, for my top 10, I strayed away from anything political. I stuck mainly to just on-field performances. I also will say that there was no baseball in my top 10, just because I feel that baseball plays are very situational. They tend to just be a home run in a clutch situation. So for me, as someone who loves watching sports for those miracle moments, I looked more to some other sports.
And it's funny because I do have a decent amount of baseball in mind, because if you look at something like baseball, every play is different. Not every pitch is the same. So yeah, it's the same outcome. A home run is hit somewhere, but there's so much more that goes into the home run. And say one play is a fastball down the middle, another play is a curveball that a guy has to go to one knee and turn on, and then a bat flip. And there's so much that comes out of it. So let's get right into it. Let's start with our honorable mentions. We'll go really quick.
Yes.
I have 3 honorable mentions. Matt, we'll start with you for yours. What are your 3?
My honorable mentions, I have Vince Young, game winner over USC in the Rose Bowl in 2006. It ended USC's hopes of winning 3 straight national championships.
Mm-hmm.
I did actually have one baseball honorable mention. I have Luis Gonzalez's walk-off in the 2001 World Series, where the Diamondbacks beat the Yankees in Game 7. And then I have Battle of the Sexes, which was the tennis match.
And I thought you were not getting political, but okay, we'll get into my top 3.
I wasn't getting political, but that was still like that was a big enough moment.
It's a huge moment.
That was also agree. Because that wasn't just political. It was also like just a great tennis match.
That's fair. My 3 honorable mentions, I have Rumble in the Jungle. I think, that's huge. Ali, George Foreman fighting in Zaire, huge moment. Because you have the rope-a-dope kind of strategy that Muhammad Ali did, which wasn't really popular at the time and still to this day isn't really that popular. Even with the fights this weekend, Mike Tyson came back, which, I guess I can add that to honorable mention now. A 54-year-old Mike Tyson comes back. Like, who would have thought that in 2020? Like, this has been a crazy week of fighting.
We missed out on the greatness of boxing. We missed out on Ali and Tyson. Like, boxing has fallen off the rails. And there are some great guys, but there's no more household names in boxing. Boxing has lost the greatness in that.
It's lost its reputation.
It really pains me inside that I missed out on boxing.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Like, I agree, but like, I'm not like pained out inside. My second honorable mention moment was the 1969 Super Bowl between the New York Jets and Baltimore Colts. Joe Broadway Namath goes out, says, "We're gonna win this week." He guarantees the win, and they get the win 16-7. 2 years later, that was a precursor to the merger between the AFL and NFL. So that was a huge moment. Number 1 honorable mention moment was the O.J. Simpson trial. The glove didn't fit. I think this is such an interesting moment in sports.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And because, while it wasn't really taught, people think of it more as a joke than a moment in sports. If we look at it now in culture, in my room, like, I have a flag, something to like that reference.
Of course.
My roommate has a flag like that.
The juice is loose, I'm sure.
The juice is loose. It's a pop culture phenomenon that happened. And I think, that's why I think it's to me an honorable mention. Because O.J. Simpson was phenomenal. He was the first football player to rush for more than 2,000 yards, found himself at the center of, it was the most publicized athlete trial in history. And, for us to like kind of think over that for moments in sports is something that I found so interesting. And that's why I wanted to include in this, because it's so slept on. It's such a slept on moment in sports history. So Matt, let's start with you. What is your number 10 moment?
Before we get to that, like, I had thought of some ideas for some more off-field kind of sports moments. That one didn't even cross my mind. I like that one. That was very creative.
Yeah, doing research and just looking into it. Like, I read this article. Like top 200 moments in sports, And I saw it and I was like, you know what? Like, yeah,
Like
it's not in my
that's got to be
top
on
10,
there. It's got to
but
be on
like,
there. Yeah.
it has to be on there because it's so different. I don't get exactly. And I don't think anyone really thought of that as a top moment in sports. But, from then, like, since then, we've seen a lot of, athletes come under fire. Maybe I should have put it as number 10. Or even higher. Like, it's such an interesting topic that we could talk about for days. But let's get into your number 10, Matt. What is
All
it and
right.
why?
So I have a 10A and 10B. So we'll start with 10B.
Okay.
For me, it was Muhammad Ali over Sonny Liston. This was back when he was still going by Cassius Clay. He was a 7-1 underdog, but was able to win the heavyweight title. For me, when I was thinking about what makes a great sports moment, it's that anyone who doesn't even know about sports can picture it in their head. And I think almost everyone can picture Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. And that really punched in the fact that this was a top 10 moment for me.
Absolutely. That's a really good moment. My number 10 is a different one. It's not technically, it's sports media based. It's the invention of fantasy football and fantasy sports. I think, let me ask you a question. When you're sitting down on Sundays and you're watching the games, what do you think about? Do you think, yeah, if your team's playing, of course you're going to think about them, but what is the other thing that's going through your mind? How is my players doing? How am I doing? We've been playing fantasy football for years. We're in a league against each other. I think I'm 4-7 in that league.
I believe I'm going to be 6-6 right now. Rough year for me.
And I think I just beat you. Did I just beat you last week?
Dak didn't do me too well this year.
No, he
clearly. And Fournette. It was a rough year for me. But yeah, I spent all of today watching Miles Sanders, hoping that he has -4 yards on the day, so I can get a first round bye in the playoffs. And right now we got to wait till Wednesday because this guy's got Baltimore's D, but gotta.
But if you look at
that's gonna be 2 days of pain and waiting.
Yeah, and fantasy sports is something that really came in 1997, and since then it has grown to a billion-dollar industry. Everybody every week cares about fantasy sports, and it's expanded. I wouldn't say billion, I'd say more of $1 million business, but you still see it. It traverses everything in football. It's changed the way that we watch the game. We now care about different players that aren't on our team that could have an impact. Like, I'm a huge Bears fan. You're a Steelers fan. As you can see, the terrible towel right behind you. And you can take a look at, our teams and say, all right, like, you're 10-0, I'm 5-6 right now. But at the end of the day, like, I don't really care about how the Bears do. It's how my fantasy football team, because that has the most impact on me this year. Like, if the Bears win, great. Like, I can, rub it in my friend's face. But if I win my fantasy league, that's huge because 1, I can avoid punishment. 2, I could potentially win money. And 3, it's just bragging rights over your friends because, fantasy sports have made sports more social. And I think that is why the invention of fantasy sports is on my top 10 list.
Yeah, so, Kyler Murray became my absolute favorite player in the NFL this season because of fantasy football. I mean, he's my starting quarterback in my best team. And since week 1, I've been watching this kid just absolutely ball out and putting up MVP numbers. And I don't think any of us would have really paid attention to it if not for the interest of fantasy football.
Yeah.
So that's it. You're coming out with these very creative ideas. I like these.
I told you. Although it's not a sports moment, it is because it's a sports media moment. And I think, that's such a huge thing because of the way that media is trending and social media is trending. I'll get into my number 9 and we'll just kind of go back and forth here.
Well, I've got my 10A right now.
You have your 10A? Okay.
Yes.
Give me your 10A.
I have Michael Jordan's final shot, Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals over the Utah Jazz, hits the buzzer beater to win his 6th ring and ends his career off.
Interesting.
Off a championship clinching buzzer beater. I can't think of a better way for someone to end their career, especially now that he is arguably the greatest basketball player of all time.
I'm going to hold off on my reply to that because I do have that coming up in my list, and I'm not going to say where. I don't want to give any spoilers right now. But I'm going to go. Do you have 10? Just 10A? Is that just 10A?
Do you want me to go 9 now?
No, I can do 9. We're chilling.
Go ahead.
Okay, so number 9, the 2008 Super Bowl 42 between the New York Giants and the undefeated New England Patriots. This is a David Tyree helmet catch. It is. Being from, we're both from New Jersey. A lot of our friends are New York fans. I remember going to the parade after that and watching that game and seeing him come down with a catch on his head. Because you have to remember, like, the Giants were supposed to be rebuilding that year. They weren't supposed to be good. They were a wild card team. They snuck into the wild card, went on this amazing Cinderella run. Eli Manning, takes them. They were heavy underdogs in the game. Desperation heave, driving with little time remaining to beat Tom Brady in a Super Bowl and Bill Belichick. Let's not forget that. Like,
Yes.
this is just such an amazing moment. And the helmet catch, no one ever thought it was a catch. Like, that really, to me, was one of the first times you started seeing that more spectacular catches coming in the NFL that are getting more popularity because people are more interested in those, crazy fun plays.
We'll get to some of those crazy catches in a
I'm
little, I
sure
assume.
you have the Odell catch, because that was exactly what I was going to allude to.
I actually don't have the Tyree catch on my top 10. Although it is a great catch, I don't think it transcended sports, whereas I think the rest of these did.
See, that's where I disagree.
But then again, from our perspective, from the New York area, it definitely transcends sports. Yeah. But no one really cares about it outside of that area. Mm-hmm. A lot of these plays are nationally, internationally recognized. For me, I was looking, if someone didn't know anything about sports, would they know this play? And I don't think every non-sports fan would know who David Tyree is.
No, and honestly, like at the time, I didn't know David Tyree, but for me, what was so amazing about this catch is that was a 16-0 team. They were going to be the second team in NFL history to have that undefeated season capped off with a Super Bowl win after the Miami Dolphins did it. So that's why, to me, to break up that as a Cinderella team, this 5 or 6 seed in the playoffs, barely supposed to do anything that season, that to me made it so much more special. So Matt, what is your number 9 moment in sports history?
Number 9, I have the Doug Flutie Hail Mary at Boston College. It was against Miami. He heaved up a pass with no time left on the clock to Gerald Filane. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but we're going to go with it. BC beat the U 47-45. And this really was the start of Doug Flutie. Doug Flutie was really slept on because he was this little guy from a small school, Boston College. And this put him on the map. Again, this took Doug Flutie from a no-name guy to someone that non-sports fans recognized. And this play is an absolute miracle play that I can play it over and over again in my head, and that's why I put it at 9.
Cool. So what is your number 8 moment in sports history?
Number 8.
Climb up the list slowly and surely.
Number 8, I have Usain Bolt in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. This is the infamous picture of as he's about 6 or 7 strides ahead of second place. He's got his arms out, embracing the crowd. He ran 9.68, which wasn't even his best time, but it was an absolute showing of why he is the fastest man in the world. He was several steps ahead to win the gold medal and wasn't even trying. And that picture is engraved in my memory, especially as a runner. That picture is engraved in my mind.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking about putting, the 2016 picture in where he's like, smiling at the camera while he's a couple strides ahead, going to win, what was probably his last gold medal ever. I thought about it, but I was like, yeah, it's cool, but like you've seen it before. So to me, like that was like a fringe one that I kind of had on there, but I didn't like it enough to really put it on it. So my number 8 is the 2016 NBA Finals and World Series. I packaged these together because earlier I just had the World Series. I'm a huge Cubs fan, so to me, 108-year curse. I had 8A as the whole Steve Bartman 2003 Cubs blow 3-1 series to the Marlins. After that, he reaches over, blocks the left fielder from catching the ball. He gets shunned on, whatever. I could talk about this for hours, but in the sake of time, I won't. The Cubs were down 3-1. They came back. Game 7 was a whirlwind. I remember that night. I almost went to bed during the game, which is really funny because I wasn't planning on staying up. Like, they went into the rain delay, and I was like, screw it. Like, we'll just, whatever. Like, it is what it is. I'll just see the rest tomorrow. I get a text like 20 minutes later. Like, I'm like in bed. I'm like, all right, like the game has to come back on. And my friend texts me. He's like, yo, like, are you watching this? Like, you just hit a double to lead off the top of the 10th. And I was like, no way. I turned the game on. Like, I'm like, mom, wake up. Like, the game's on. And we watch it. They score 2 runs, which is something funny because nobody remembers the 2 runs. Everyone remembers the Zobrist double down the line where they scored the first one, but no one remembers the Montero second hit in that inning that brought in, the go-ahead run, and then Montgomery in the bottom inning. I know that whole Joe Buck transcription by heart. That's just something amazing to me. And that was just a moment to me that to see the Cubs break that 108-year curse. Theo Epstein broke a curse in a second city, or a curse or a long drought. He did it in 2004 with the Red Sox. Now he did it in 2016 with the Cubs. And the other game I haven't wrapped up into that is the Cavs. They came back down for 3-1 against the Golden State Warriors, who everyone thought was, going to bulldoze them. There was no way the Cavs were going to win. LeBron willed himself to win a championship and end a drought in Cleveland.
So I'll respond to the Cleveland thing later because that's on my list. But as for the Cubs, yes, breaking a 108-year drought was incredible. But I think the play that everyone remembers from that is the last out. But if you really watch it, it's the most anticlimactic play ever. He literally grounds out to third and just throws it to first. Like, as a play to cap off, this end to a drought that is over a century, it really wasn't that special of a play. It was a special moment for Cubs fans and for baseball, but the physical play itself was cool. They did it.
Yeah, but if you look at it too, like everything that happened, the Cubs took a commanding lead in that game. They were up 6-3 at one point. Rajai Davis hits a home run against Aroldis Chapman, who ever since then has struggled in close games. This year he blew the game to Mark Brasso against the Rays, and everyone knows how that went. The Rays went on and lost the World Series, whatever. But it's just something that is so like in the game of baseball. No one ever thought the Cubs would be able to win the World Series. They've come so close. They're the lovable losers. And to finally get over that hump and do it, I think to me is so special. And that's why it's one of the top moments in sports history. Because after that, the Nationals went on and broke their curse. The Astros finally won it for the first time. And the Dodgers, haven't won it. And they won it all this year. So since the Cubs, broke through and won theirs, you've seen new teams being able to win the World Series who haven't won it before or haven't won it in a really long time.
All right. You want to hit us with your number 7?
I would love to. My number 7 is Tiger Woods winning the Masters in 1997. This one is so different because yes, it's golf. No one ever, thinks of golf as a top moment in sports, but
Tiger's different.
But it's
Tiger's
Tiger.
Different.
Tiger Woods, this was a turning point for golf. The first time a young black man was at the top of the game of golf was something that no one would have thought. Yes, a lot of things have happened to Tiger since. And yes, 7A, winning the Masters last year. In 97, he went up and he gave a huge hug to his dad after. And last year in 2019, to see him, and his son embrace after that win was so different. And, after that, Tiger really headlined golf from 97 to 2007, 2008 before he had his, huge fall off that we don't have to get into it. But, to see the 7A him come back and win it all again was so special. And that was just a huge turning point in golf to say, hey, like, you don't have to be, of a certain race to be good at this sport. A black man was now able to win the Masters, which is probably the most prestigious tournament in golf in the PGA Tour.
I'd say it's probably one of the most prestigious tournaments in sports.
So that absolutely transcended the game of golf, and that is why it lands on number 7 in my list. Matt, what do you have for number 7?
Call me a little biased, but I'm going with the Immaculate Reception. Franco Harris, 1972. It was the first round of the playoffs, Steelers-Raiders. Famous play, Terry Bradshaw throws a pass, bounces off a player's helmet. Franco Harris scoops it up right before it's about to hit the ground, runs it in for the game-winning touchdown with no time left on the clock. Of course, they didn't end up winning Super Bowl that year, but they would win 4 in the next decade. This play is a miracle. And as a Steelers fan, this is a play that
who wasn't alive yet.
I wasn't alive, and yet as a Steelers fan, we all know this play, and I think people outside of this play know it because it was just such a fluke, and it was the start to a dynasty that would take a team that had struggled to win 2 games in a season in the 60s to becoming the greatest defense of that era. And this was the start of it, and this play was the start of the Steel Curtain.
Mm-hmm. And that Steel Curtain is exactly what Pittsburgh has been famous for. What is your number 6 as we keep climbing the lists?
Number 6, I have the 2016 NBA Finals, but specifically LeBron James's block in Game 7. Mm-hmm. Famous moment when Andre Iguodala goes to hit the basket and he slaps it against the backboard. With a minute remaining, this would, of course, give LeBron his first championship in Cleveland and end Cleveland's losing drought.
Mm-hmm. So for my number 6, I have a college football moment of Joe Paterno getting fired. And this is a moment that's so special in, college football, especially the Big Ten, because Penn State was a powerhouse for years. Penn State, everyone was trying to catch up to Penn State. Typically, this was before Ohio State really took over as, the prominent team in the Big Ten. Yeah, Nebraska was that prominent team in the early 2000s, but since then, it was really Penn State for a long period of time. And after the whole Jerry Sandusky scandal, at Penn State, the whole sports world, kind of came to a stop. Like Penn State was severely penalized for this. They were, pushed back years, and to this day, they still have not gotten back to where they were back then. And, it was a dark and unsettling time for arguably one of the greatest coaches in college football, and to hear all the allegations coming out against Penn State and, they were so great on the field, but, are their actions on the field, can they justify the actions off the field? And that's something that we talk about. Indiana in the late 90s and even before that in the Bobby Knight era, where was his winning able to justify his actions off the court? And it's just kind of Paterno. A lot of different things happen, between the Knight and Paterno, but the core ideas of is winning justifiable to what you do off, came up once again, and you can see, as it comes up. And that was really the last time where we really heard something like that until a couple of years later, Larry Nassar, Michigan State, that was the same idea. And you can just see, I don't want to say like the Big Ten has this kind of tendency, but you see, the Big Ten teams, go through these phases, after Indiana lost Bobby Knight, they got to a national championship in 2002, but we haven't been able to get back there ever since. Penn State, was a phenomenal team, hasn't been able to get back there. And, I don't really know Michigan State, gymnastics very well or anything, so I'm not really going to speak to that. But, I just think that this is such a key moment in sports history for college football.
As a Maryland student, and Penn State, well, to us is our biggest rival. To them, they don't really know us. But, this as someone who's just become a diehard fan, especially working for the football team here, I can definitely say that is a moment that Maryland sports fans all think about a lot. Let's put it like that. All right, why don't you hit us with your next one on the list, number 5?
Yeah, did you do 6 yet?
I did. It was LeBron James's block.
Right. So my number 5 is the 1998 home run chase between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. McGwire of the Cardinals, Sosa of the rival Cubs. This home run race really revitalized baseball after the 94 strike season. They've had a lot of issues since then. Baseball was, not as popular as, let's say, the NBA was gaining more popularity. The NFL obviously becoming the number 1 sport in America at the time. So baseball was really on the decline. And that home run race, them able to break Roger Maris's record, they were very fun guys. It wasn't like you were rooting for any villain. You were rooting for 2 almost heroes, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, 2 guys who, their smiles were infectious. Their cities were loving it. Like these were, and especially in Chicago and St. Louis, 2 rivals who weren't really rivals at the time. This rejuvenated that rivalry. And yeah, it dwindled away in the late 2010s into the late 2000s, early 2010s. But this really brought back baseball and brought it back to a point where it hasn't been in a long time. So that's why I think this, really changed the game of baseball. And now you see from that, the steroids era happened, and that was really a precursor to it. But more guys today are able to hit the ball further, from learning from guys like Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds. So I think that's why this is my number 5 on my list. Matt, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is the final 10 seconds of the 2016 college basketball national championship between Villanova and UNC. Villanova was up 3 points with about 10 seconds remaining. Marcus Page of UNC hits the most improbable 3-pointer with 5 seconds remaining. Man is literally floating in midair and hits the shot. With 5 seconds remaining, though, Villanova takes it up the court. Chris Jenkins hits the buzzer beater 3 in just an absolute back-to-back. One of the most crazy moments that I've ever watched live. I think we can agree when you watch a moment live, it definitely rises up in that top moment.
Absolutely.
This was one of the most incredible, jaw-dropping moments for me. Just that Marcus Page's shot was, wow, this is going overtime. And then Nova hits the game-winning, Chris Jenkins the game-winning shot, and my jaw hit the floor. And I think that although it may not have the same outside of sports recognition that some of these others do, that was the greatest 2 consecutive plays in college basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I completely agree. Like, I remember, being there that night. Not, like, being there, but, like, in the moment that night, watching the game. Like, okay, like, overtime, cool, whatever. Like I didn't have either of these teams in my finals because my Final Four bracket busted like it always does. So to really like see this game and just enjoy it as just a spectator and sports fan was really fun because that final 10 seconds was amazing. There's that's I mean that's March Madness tea. That's college basketball. It's core.
Exactly.
I love college basketball and to see, to watch that game as a 15-year-old kid, being like, oh my God, like that just happened. And then you turn around and you're going crazy because, we know Villanova fans and UNC fans, and just to see their excitement and like their emotion during the game, it was awesome. So I really think that was different. Matt, what's your number 4?
Number 4, I'm going with Odell Beckham's famous catch against the Cowboys. Regardless of the score of that game or what happened with Odell's career after that, that catch went beyond football. Odell went from a player to a verb. When we play a football game, you yell, "Throw me an Odell."
Really?
That's the kind of moment that I think deserves a top 10. The fact that maybe this isn't the way it is outside the Northeast. Again, we are a little biased to where we're from.
Absolutely.
But you play football and you throw a ball way up and someone grabs it with one hand. It's an Odell. And the fact that his name, because of that action, basically became a new verb, I think that puts it in the top 5.
And it's so similar to other things that we do. Is like anytime you kind of like step back, Dirk, you step back, or you have Kobe, you throw out
a piece of loose leaf paper, you yell Kobe. Like, exactly.
Like that's just something. And yeah, like it could just be that, that's just how the young generations kind of view sports stars as we want to be them. And that's exactly what it is. It's, I want to do that. Like I want to be that good. But at the end of the day, yeah, we're not that good. Like, look at us, neither of us are in the NFL. Neither of us are on the college football team, but we want to idolize those moments because those moments are so special. And yeah, they only happen once. Like I remember that catch. That catch was insane. There was a pass interference call on that catch too, and he still made it, which is even crazier.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, like that changed people's perception of the New York Giants and specifically Odell Beckham Jr. He went from, Giants wide receiver to superstar, transcending sports wide receiver, right? The guy who was, going to be the next, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, that level of stardom.
If he had dropped that pass, Odell Beckham's career would have gone nowhere. I mean, if you look at what he's done on the Browns, which is arguably a better system than what he was on in New York, he's done nothing. Those miracle plays, that one and the one he had the season or two following, that's what made Odell Beckham's career.
Mm-hmm.
And I think without that catch, he is not even – I don't think he's a household name the way he is now.
Yeah.
All right, hit me with your number 4 or 3 are you on?
I'm on 4. So 4. My number 4 is Jackie Robinson in the major leagues breaks the color barrier. We can talk about this all day, but it's such a common thing. Yeah, like my 4, 3, 2, and 1 are kind of like, okay, like anyone could guess them. Because I went with more. How did that have the lasting impact on sports and the current times? But when Jackie Robinson broke that color barrier, no one thought at the time it was possible. Yeah, he did go 0 for the game, but it was one of the most epic 0 for games in MLB history. Everyone wanted to see that happen, even though not a lot of people at the time were supportive of it. But that just showed how sports were being more integrated. And, how, we kept leading up to the modern thing is, yes, was Jackie Robinson the first professional athlete to play in, a pro sports league against, white people? No, he wasn't the first. And that's a very common misconception. And I'll get to that in my number 3 moment. But I still think that, did so much more for the world of sports and for equality than anything, else at the time.
I agree. Jackie Robinson, I did not put that in my top 10 just because, again, I stuck to purely on-field moments.
Mm-hmm.
But without Jackie Robinson, yes, there were other people who broke it before him, but Jackie Robinson was the face of integration into sports. And without him, without him, sports would look so different today.
Absolutely.
And he is to thank, as well as the Dodgers organization, for letting him for taking a risk on something like this to change the face of sports. sports would not be the same today.
And every day, every year, he's honored every day, every year. You have, Jackie Robinson Day, all the guys, whether it's, a patch on the side of the hat or they all wear 42 on their backs, it's such an iconic moment in sports. So my number 3, we'll get to that, a little previously, 1936 Olympics, Jesse Owens, racing, in the midst of the Adolf Hitler Nazi Germany. Owens was there to disprove of the Aryan supremacy idea. Still, to me, this has so much more than just, the race between, Owens, we're both Jewish. So, we really understand the impact of, Nazi Germany and, all the terrible things, luckily, none of my ancestors were in the Holocaust at the time. All of mine were over in the United States, but to see a guy go out there and really, prove that, the people that he's trying to brainwash are no better, than a regular guy, and especially a guy like Jesse Owens, who was not, anywhere near Aryan, and to just disprove that, it's such a big accomplishment. And, to face, Hitler at the time was so unspoken of, because of, no one was standing up for the Jews at that moment, and I'm not saying that has any relationship to it, but the underlying value that we look back, this was what, 85 plus years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
1936, 2020, 16 years minus 100. Do the math.
We're not
84 years ago.
No need.
We are not math majors. Let's remember that. 84 odd years ago, and to see that, 84 years later and look back at it, it's such a huge moment in sports, not only, for, inclusion and diversity, but also for the times in that being, how people were struggling and nobody was there to speak up. And for Jesse Owens to do it really transcended sports.
Yeah, when I made my list, I wanted to include something running, and I ended up I went with Usain Bolt, mostly just because Usain Bolt has more meaning to me. I mean, Jesse Owens has a greater meaning to the world, and as a Jew as well, he has a great meaning. But I think just the fact that I watched Usain Bolt break the world record and win those medals, it just added something to me. So and again, I didn't really want to include anything political in this, and that's why I left him off. But you can't talk about greatest sports moments without talking about Jesse Owens.
Absolutely.
For my number 3, I went with The Hand of God by Maradona. This was not so much a great play as it's probably.
I'm glad you included this, because I did not.
It's not a great play. It's the most controversial play, though.
And that's the exact reason I did not include it.
Quarterfinal of the 1986 FIFA World Cup, Argentina versus England. Maradona, as we know, punched the ball into the goal, but it wasn't called. Argentina would then go on to win 2-1, and would later go on to win the World Cup. Look, Maradona passed away under a week ago. Yeah. And
3 days from the time of recording.
Correct. And I mean, he had an amazing goal 5 minutes after this, but everyone remembers this. This is probably the most controversial play in sport, because this is what sent Argentina to winning a World Cup, which to most of the world outside the United States is pretty much the biggest award you can get.
But to the United States,
I literally had to do research on this in preparation for this. I had very little idea about this.
I knew that,
I knew about it, but I didn't know the ins and outs of it. But
yeah,
to the world, this is probably 1 or 2. So I threw it at 3 just because you can't talk about, because greatest sports moments also have controversies, and this is probably the most controversial no call. I mean, we've seen a lot of controversial no calls, but
Mitchell Trubisky getting dragged down by his face mask last night. Sorry.
There's no need to get angry about your 5-5 Bears. They're not going anywhere. 5-6 Bears. See, my Steelers, we're going to be the second team to go undefeated and win a Super Bowl.
You're not.
Just you wait.
So you guys lose on Wednesday.
Steel curtain part 2. What do you mean? They don't even have Lamar. We're going against RG3.
Still a former Heisman. Okay, we're getting completely
off track. But why wouldn't we? All right.
Absolutely. I would expect nothing less. I knew we were going to get carried away at one point.
Yeah. Do you want me to go with my number 2?
Yeah, but before we get into that, that was the match where people started, putting Maradona on that same level as Pele, where that conversation that, who was better, was it Maradona or was it Pele? That's when that conversation really began to happen. And that's, rest in peace,
Yeah.
rest in power.
Maradona will
he
go down
transcend-
as he'll go down as a top 5 soccer player of all time.
Absolutely. All right, Matt, let's hear your number 2.
Number 2, I'm sure a lot of people would say this is number 1, but my number 1 is better. I went with the Miracle on Ice at number 2. The U.S. was versus over the Soviets in the 1980 Winter Olympics up in Lake Placid. It was the semifinals. U.S. was 1,000 to 1 underdogs, which until I think Leicester City won the Premier League was the greatest upset.
I think they were 1 to like
history.
9 something.
They were like
something like
that.
They
were 1,500 to 1. The Miracle on Ice was 1,000 to 1. They beat the Soviets 4-3. And of course, there's the famous broadcasting called "Do You Believe in Miracles?" There's been movies made about this. Like if you don't know sports but you know Disney, you know the Miracle on Ice. And this is
literally the number 1 movie on Disney Plus. If you look at the sports section, the like feel good sports movies, Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S., who was not a hockey country, beat the Soviet superpower. And not to get political, but this did have some U.S.-Soviet Cold War implications to it. But the bigger part of it is the David versus Goliath. No one gave the U.S. a chance, and they would later go on to win the gold medal, and that completely changed Americans' perspective on hockey. I mean, the NHL greatly improved its viewership because of the Miracle on Ice.
Yeah, and I'm gonna get to that like in literally.
Let me
30
guess.
seconds.
Let me guess. That's your 1.
All right, okay. My number 2. My number 2 is MJ's last shot in the '98 finals. To me, being a Bulls fan, I'm a little bit more biased about this, but it was his last shot as a Chicago Bull. Everyone knows that was the last dance year. They made an entire documentary out of it. Almost 10, 20, 22 years ago. This happened, and 22 years later now you have the whole thing. Jordan stole the ball from Malone, and it was a controversial play. Don't forget that. Like, people were convinced that MJ pushed off, which, looking at it again, he kind of did push off. And he hit that 2-point jump shot with 5.2 seconds left on the clock, and the Bulls were able to capture it. It capped off the Bulls dynasty. The Bulls haven't been the same since, which is very unfortunate. But I think that was just such a cool moment, because who else to end the Bulls dynasty and make that last shot and win that last championship than Michael Jordan? And screw you, Jerry Reinsdorf and Krause and all of you people who thought, let's just blow up the team and restart instead of let them run through and try to win a few more championships. Because quite frankly, I think they could have had 1 or 2 more.
They would have.
I really think they did.
Actually,
and they really could have.
So last weekend I made the 10-hour journey out to Indiana for the game, and I watched the entire Last Dance because it's 10 hours.
Yeah,
I start to finish. And
do you guys bus, or how do you get to places? Did you bus to Bloomington, or did you?
Yeah, no. The players get to fly. The underclassmen managers take. I did 20 hours of driving, and assuming Michigan, because as of now Michigan has some scares of COVID cases, but assuming Michigan's on, it's 16 hours of driving this weekend.
Oh.
And then week 9 is either in Detroit, Indianapolis, or Minneapolis, and that's going to be another multi-hour drive.
Oh, that okay. All right. This is
another time.
Another topic for another time.
Another day. All right. So why don't you give your number 1, because I just totally spoiled it for everyone.
The Miracle on Ice 1980 Winter Games. The U.S. team, a bunch of amateurs, none of them played in college, led by Herb Brooks. Came in. They were complete underdogs, as you already said. The Soviets won 5 of the last 6 Olympic gold medals. So think about that. Like, a U.S. team who no one thought anything of, has to go in, and they got blown out right before the Olympics. I believe it was 10-3. They lost to the Soviets.
Yeah,
like 2 weeks before the Olympics.
In practices,
in Madison Square Garden, they got absolutely demolished. And to see this team turn around in the matter of time that it did and come out and get that win, against the Soviets, who were heavy favorites, it's just amazing to me. Like, that's the greatest moment in sports history. It has so much impact outside of the game. It was going on at the height of the Cold War, that to me it just transcended. And the Micah Ruzioni goal, next to none, I think. I'm speechless because of that moment. I just love that moment in sports history. And you also talked about it before and spoiled it. Thank you very much.
I mean, I knew it was gonna, like, the fact that you hadn't set it up till that point, like, I knew it was gonna be your number 1.
I think everyone knew it was gonna be my number 1 if I hadn't set it up to 5. Then it's like, all right, like, it has to be up there. But that moment in sports history just goes down as one of the best all time.
So my number one moment in sports history did not even make your honorable mentions, which really surprises me.
Really?
The number one play in sports history, in my opinion, is the kick six. 2014 Iron Bowl. Tied at 28, undefeated Alabama and Auburn, number 1 Alabama, number 4 Auburn. Whoever wins this game is going to go to the SEC championship game and eventually go on to the national championship, most likely. 1 second left on the clock. Alabama kicks a 57-yard field goal. It's short. Chris Davis catches the ball at the back of the end zone, takes it back 109 yards with no time remaining. There are few interesting statistics. There's been 6 college football games that have caused earthquakes that hit the Richter scale. This is one of them. And for me, I've seen this play. I've rewatched this play maybe 75 times. It gives me chills every time I watch it. It is,
especially with the Iron Bowl being last week. They were
Iron Bowl
for sure replaying that.
Yes, I mean, it is just any opportunity to see Nick Saban like pissed off is great. But this was a team that, Cam Newton was the miracle season in 2010, and no one gave them a whole lot of credit going into 2014, and they came out, they had back-to-back games with miracle plays, and then to end the season with a play that can only be described as an answered prayer. Like, I don't think that there is a better play in sports history.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
It didn't even make your honorable mentions. What the heck?
It didn't.
How?
I'm embarrassed now. It didn't make my honorable mention. I remember, I was in the car when that moment happened. I was driving from Toledo, Ohio, back to New Jersey, and I just remember, 6 o'clock. We're like almost home. I'm just tired. The game's gonna go over to overtime. We're gonna be home for overtime, and all of a sudden you hear on the broadcast, and the kick is up, and it is short. But Auburn is going to take it out of the end zone. And I'm like, oh my God. And like, we're all screaming in the car. And I mean, my sister's dead asleep. My sister does not like football, but like me, my dad, and my mom all know the importance of this game. Like, unfortunately, the Iron Bowl this year was a blowout, which I called. That was a very surprising.
Auburn's not great this year, and Alabama's great.
They're 22 in the country.
They don't deserve to be.
No, absolutely not. But just
when
that play itself, when
he cuts that corner and it's just Auburn players in daylight ahead of him, and you see the camera start shaking, like you there's never been a play on TV that I felt more at. Like, just the overall atmosphere of that game while it was happening, like you could feel the energy in your room, in your TV, in your living room, and there has been no play ever that has made my jaw drop through the floor to that level, ever.
I am speechless because, that's kind of the perfect number one is, I had a Miracle on Ice. Yeah, that is so much bigger because it has so much more to do with the world.
It has more world ramifications. But if we're talking about a miracle, like a singular play miracle,
best sports plays, best sports moment, because of how much that game means, the Iron Bowl means to Auburn, Alabama, the fans, the college football fans.
Iron Bowl is the biggest. I know there's debates over what's the biggest rivalry. I think the biggest rivalry in college sports is Auburn, Alabama.
Number 1, Auburn, Alabama. Number 2, Michigan, Ohio State.
Yes, then them, and then But I think Alabama, Auburn is
number 100. Penn State, Maryland.
hey, we're making it a rivalry. Just you wait. 5 years from now.
Yeah, when James Franklin gets fired.
James Franklin's going to be gone in 2 years.
Probably. Jim Harbaugh will be gone after this year.
Maryland, the streets of Maryland will be rejoicing with parties post-COVID. Hey, well, what an interesting top 10 list.
Definitely
different.
Surprises.
Definitely some surprises. Yes.
A lot of different, but that's the whole point of this. Not everyone's top 10 best moments in sports history have to be the same. They don't have to be, best moments in a sports game. They can be best moments that transcend sports itself. And I think that's why everyone has such a unique view. And your number 2 was my number 1. And, your number 1 didn't even make my list. And some of my lists you never even thought of.
Yeah. And you're a big baseball fan, and you had baseball. I'm a big college football fan. So that's why for me, the kick six has such a bigger importance to sports for me. And I cut some honorable mentions, but I had a lot of football stuff on there. Some of it a little biased towards my Steelers, but I had to throw Santonio Holmes on there. Like, come on, Santonio Holmes catching the Super Bowl. That was, we won that.
Well, you barely beat Arizona. Let's just.
Yeah, we beat Kurt Warner's Arizona Cardinals. That was a great team.
Kurt Warner's Arizona Cardinals were a very good team, and it also, Kurt Warner, like Arizona Cardinals, every couple years they're on. Like a couple years ago, everyone forgets that Carson Palmer season right before he tore his ACL.
They went 12-4.
They went 12-4, and he tore his ACL in the playoffs and was pretty much retired from that moment. A lot of great sports moments. Sports moments don't just have to happen about the good things. They could be the bad things as well. The things we remember.
Exactly.
Tears ACL. Joe Burrow recently tore his ACL. Maybe this could be the biggest turnaround for the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe.
We'll get into my opinion. We'll get into my opinion on Joe Burrow in another podcast. Because I can go on and on about the problems with this kid, but.
Wow, you really are not a Joe Burrow fan. That's surprising. Especially, I just remember another great sports moment. It's just him walking out of the tunnel at LSU with Burrow, Burreaux, on his back. Everyone's cheering and bowing for him. That's just an awesome moment because there's so many good moments like that in college football.
That, and after he won that national championship, when he's sitting in the locker room smoking a cigar, I literally remade that exact photo when I graduated, because like that photo was the most it was the perfect way to cap off the greatest season of all time. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to recreate this because this is too perfect.
That's going to do it for Matt and Evan in the morning. For Matt Leviss, I'm Evan Kamikow. We'll see you next time on Matt and Evan in the morning. 'Cause I'm better off on my own. Oh, save your soul.